Hi geometry students, and I hope you are having a good day. I am starting chapter 2 and we are really going to be getting into some of the more intricate parts of geometry. And today we're going to be looking at segment bisectors. So I'd like for you to turn to page 53. I'm not going to do the little activity that's up there. You're certainly welcome to do it if you have a few minutes. But I am hopping all the way down to the bottom of the page where we see a couple of definitions. Now, if you have not already gotten into the habit of doing your index cards, now would be a super time to start, and you probably should go back and review and do a few cards from the first chapter. We have a couple of definitions here. We have midpoint, we have segment bisector, and we have the words bisect. So I would make sure that these get added to your index cards. The midpoint of a segment is the point that divides it into two congruent or equal segments, so that each side is exactly the same measurement. A segment bisector is a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. And to bisect something means to just divide it into half. So you see a couple of examples, but let's go ahead and start with our first example. Now they give us a line here, or a segment. Let me put it up for us. Make it a little bit longer here for us so we can see it. Points on both ends means we've got a segment going there. We have A and B. Remember, we name our lines with letters. So this is segment AB, but we also have something right in the middle. And I'm going to just take a guess here that this is the middle. And we're going to call that M, point M. Now, one of the things that they tell us, they give us, one of the things in geometry that you really need to start doing and observing is writing down every piece of information they give you. Sometimes they're going to give you measurements, sometimes they'll give you angles, sometimes they'll give you a theorem or a postulate. And you have to, you're a detective. In geometry, you are a detective. So you need to observe every piece of information that comes your way. Now, one piece of information that they give us is that this whole thing equals 26. We don't know if it's 26 inches, if it's 26 centimeters, if it's 26 miles, whatever. It equals 26. Now, let's read this. M is the midpoint of AB, of segment AB, and they want us to find AM and MB. So often what I do when I'm solving is I go ahead and write down what I need to find. I need to find AM and I need to find MB. Those are the things I want to find. So remind yourself, make sure you know what you want to find. Now they did tell me that M is the midpoint. And based on those definitions that I've already looked at on the other page, the segment bisector, it intersects at the midpoint. I know that the midpoint cuts the line in half, and then it makes both sides equal. So if the whole thing is 26, and I'm applying the midpoint, then I know that both of these are going to be 13. So I have to use the information that they gave us. They said that this whole thing was 26. They asked me for these two things. So AM, now I can erase this and put 13. And I can erase this and put 13. So it's very important you read the information, that you write down everything you know, and that you then find your answers based on that. Now let's take a look at the next one, and then I'm going to have you do some checkpoints. erase and still reuse this. All right. So we have another line. Now this one is RS with P as the midpoint. R and S with P as the midpoint. Now, I don't have a whole measurement, but I do know that this is congruent with this. That's what those straight lines mean. And I know that that's 7. So if I know that that is 7, I have some information then to be able to know that that is 7. This is midpoint, and I know these are congruent. And the little red lines tell me they are. Now, it says that it wants me to find out what PS and RS. So I want to find PS and RS. It is so important that you know what you're answering. Because if you happen to tell me that RP is 7 and PS is 7, you've really only answered one of these questions. They want to know what the whole measurement is. And so the whole measurement is 14 because the individual measurements are 7 and 7. So make sure you read that carefully. Now what I want you to do is I want you to pause for a second and I want you to do checkpoints. Part of the work when you're watching a video is often to stop and do the checkpoints. So I want you to stop and do checkpoints 1 and 2. And so pause the video for a second, and then we're going to come back and I'll give you the answers for those. So pause the video and do those 2 checkpoints. Okay, if you are back, I am assuming you did checkpoints 1 and 2. And checkpoint 1, it says find DE and EF. And DE is 9 and EF is 9 because they told us the whole thing was 18. The second one says find NP and MP. So we know that MN is congruent with NP. That means NP is 11. And that means the whole thing is 22. All right. Let's take a look at the next example. And many of you asked me last year, why is algebra useful? And, well, part of the reason it's useful is because you need it in geometry. So let's see how we're going to need it in geometry. And let me put up here on the board our next problem. And just give me a second to write it all out. And I have A, B, and I have a midpoint. And that midpoint is actually seeing something cut through it, not just... And I know that this side is 5x. And I know that this side, I know they're congruent because the congruent symbol is there. But let's just say we have a lazy scientist, and our lazy scientist on this side, he wrote 35. And over here, he wrote 5x because he just wasn't thinking. Now, if I know that they're congruent, that means I know that they're equal. And I'm going to use my algebra to solve that. And I'm just going to transfer everything right down here. Because I know congruent, that means they're equal. And now I know how to solve and figure out what x is going to be. I'm going to divide by 5, and I come up with x equals 7. Now, how you write the measurement is not important. If you want to write 5x is what this equals from here to here, that's okay. But let's write 5x in both places. And if you want to write 35, then let's write 35 in both places. So we're just practicing with algebra there. There's nothing really significant in that you need to know. But you are going to see algebraic equations pop up. All right, let's take a look at the next piece that you should write on an index card. So I want you to take a look at the midpoint formula, and that's the little blue box on page 55. This should become part of your index card collection that I'm sure will be worth a lot of money at the end of this year. In the midpoint, let me just tell you what that means. The coordinates of the midpoint of a segment are the averages of the x-coordinates and the y-coordinates of the endpoints. Now, this just sounds so confusing. It's really not. I hate the diagram they give there because it makes it seem so confusing. So let me see if I can make it a little more simple for you. And what I would like to do is first point out the formula. So if you want to find the midpoint, it's going to be x sub 1. Remember we talked about these guys last year. Plus x sub 2 over 2. We're finding the middle of something. Same thing if you have the y's. It's y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Now I want you to get your eyes off the confusing little diagram that they have, and I want you to hop down to example number 4, where they actually show us a real life problem. So I am going to do an example here. And I am going to, it'll be similar to the one that's A in your book. And the A is at 1, 2, right there. All right. And then the B is at 7, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is right up here. All right, so I have written out example 4A. They actually have a line drawn there, which is fine. We can draw the line. But what they want to know is the midpoint. And to find the midpoint, I'm going to go to that formula. I'm going to say x sub 1 plus x sub 2. Well, I'm going to look for my x's. Well, here's the first one and here's the second one. And so I'm going to put 1 plus 7 over 2. And I end up with 8 over 2 or 4. All right? So there's one of my points, 4. Now let's go to the next one. And I do need to do the y. Y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Well, my y's, I'll put those in boxes, are 2 and 4. So I'm going to have 2 plus 4 over 2. And I'm going to end up with 6 over 2 or 3. So my midpoint of that particular line, and remember algebra was all about lines. There is connection. You need to know the midpoint formula for advanced math. So 4 and 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And at 1, 2, 3 is going to be somewhere around there. Where I've started is my midpoint. So all these cool little diagrams and everything they drew in that little index card, light blue box, I don't find helpful. I find helpful just jumping in and actually doing it. Now, if you look at B, let me do that example and then I'll let you try a couple. Okay, we have let me draw another. I need to get some graphs to put on this board here at my house, and I don't have those. Our first point is going to be -2 and 3. So somewhere around there. And our other point is going to be at 5, -1. So somewhere around here. So here's our 2 points. Let's write them down so that we remember what they were, -2 and 3. Let me make sure I'm right. And 5 and -1. All right, now I am going to take my formula. I'm going to start with the x's. I just like to start with the x's. So my x's I'm going to put in a circle. There's my two x's. And I'm going to have negative 2 plus 5 over 2. Here's my negative 2 and my 5. I put those in over 2. Now, I know that negative 2 plus 5 is going to give me 3. It's kind of like saying 5 minus 2. So it's going to give me 3 over 2. So my x is going to be 3 over 2, or 1 1/2. Now let's do our y's. Y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. I'm going to put those in boxes. And I'm going to have 3 plus negative 1 over 2. And so I'm going to have to subtract that, and I'm going to end up with 2 over 2, or 1. My midpoint is this, right there. 1 1/2 and 1. Right about there is my midpoint. So this is how you find the midpoint on a line when you know what the points on a graph are. It's pretty easy. So I want you to pause for a second, and I want you to do 3, 4, and 5 at the bottom of 55. And then we'll come back and I'll give you the answers to those, and then I think you're set to do this homework. So if you're back, then I'm assuming that you have done the checkpoints 3, 4, and 5, and let me give you those answers. Checkpoint 3, the answer is 3, 4. Now you don't have to put those points on a graph like I just did back here. You can actually just use them and come up with the midpoint just based on that information. Number 4, the answer is 2, negative 1. And number 5 is negative 5 over 2 and 3 over 2. If you had questions or didn't get those right, I would highlight, circle them, or write them in your notes and ask me to go over them in class next week. So that is all for 2.1. If you have questions, you're certainly welcome to send those to me. And otherwise, I will see you in the next lesson. Have a good day.